Hello, everyone, and welcome to day 4 of the Bright Star Intuitive Painting series. Today, we're adding the next major color layer to this painting, which is going to be a rich magenta purple galaxy color. And I'm going to blend it into the deep blue background from last session, and I have a little bit of a surprise as to how this picture turned out. But before we get started, let's do a quick recap of how this painting came to be. On day 1, I added a watercolor wash. If you want to check out the previous videos, I explained the story behind the bright star. On day 2, I started identifying the initial shapes using very watered down acrylic paint and highlighting a few unique spots that I caught from watercolor marks from the watercolor paint. On day 3, we started adding the outer layer of the darkmost color of the final painting. For today's painting, the focus is the magenta purple color that shows up on the star. And I also need a little bit of that darker blue-black mixture that I made in the last video so that the transition between the two colors feels soft and layered rather than a harsh line. I'm starting with Cadra Deep White and Phthalo Blue that will create that dark blue. I have no idea what color I am going to need to mix for the magenta, so a lot of this is going to be me experimenting with the paints. I do check my reference card on the Cad Red Deep, and it looks like I need about a 50-50 amount of red with white to get close to the magenta. As I begin to mix the red with the white, I can see that it's way too muted. It's too soft. Um, I think that it needs a little bit more blue in it to get the purple color. And eventually I start adding a little bit more red. And as I mixed my dark blue color, I can see that that was too light. So I needed a little bit of a darker color for that. So a lot of the coming up with paint colors that meet your needs, a lot of it is just experimentation. At some point in the mixing stage, I decided that this is going to be a progress over perfection situation, and that is something that I've learned over time with art. Sometimes you just kind of have to roll with where the painting wants you to go and where the colors want you to go instead of forcing it to try to be perfect. And I do talk about that with my students quite a bit. Sometimes finishing an assignment at 50% is better than never finishing it because we get stuck on wanting to get it all done or 100% done. Um, so I eventually just decided the color is close enough for today. It allows me to continue with this painting and move forward rather than getting trapped um, in a loop where I'm trying to match this color. I'm intentionally leaving gaps between the dark blue and the magenta because I want to blend them together using white paint while everything is still wet. This is one of my favorite painting techniques. I love how this kind of soft blending, the colors kind of mix naturally on the canvas. Because I use heavy body acrylic paint, it dries really quickly. So I'm constantly adding water back into the paint, and I do need to go back into that dark blue and just add a little bit where the magenta and the blue will line up so that I can work with that wet paint and get it to blend. Next, I add just a little bit of white on each of those boundaries between the magenta and the purple, and I clean the brush repeatedly so that neither of the two colors get onto the white paint, and I just kind of pile the paint up together. Next, while the dark blue, white, and pink magenta paint are all still wet, I'm going to very lightly go over top of them and start blending those colors together. The last step is to just go back in with that dark paint and kind of highlight any areas that got a little bit of white paint on them within these smaller sections. Essentially for the rest of the video, it is rinse and repeat where I just go through and I paint the dark parts and the magenta parts and then add that white in the middle. And so I think this is a good time for me to sing the song that inspired the idea of a bright star. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Part of the reason that I sing instead of adding music is I haven't quite figured out how to add music to my videos. And so if any of you know how to do that and you want to share those tips and tricks, I would greatly appreciate it. The one thing I wanted to do before stopping this painting was make sure that I get those original watercolor marks highlighted again. So I'm just going to go into some black paint with a very tiny brush and highlight those lines. Unfortunately, there's a lot of paint covering up the lines, and so I do expand them, and that is kind of the part of intuitive painting that I love, that original creations kind of grow and morph as everything in life grows and morphs. As I was drawing in the black lines, outlining the watermarks, I kind of got into a little bit of a flow state, and I decided to outline the middle part with the star part. And I took a art or a class recently, and one of the fellow artists told me that my work reminded them of pop art because I like dark, bold outlines. And so this section kind of turned out to be a homage to that conversation with that fellow artist. The goals with these outlines are to create separation between the glowing teal center of the star and the surrounding magenta and black galaxy colors without losing the energy of the painting. I really love how this painting is evolving emotionally too. The entire reason I started the Bright Star Intuitive Painting series was because I was feeling proud of myself after getting an artist grant, and I wanted a creative outlet to express those positive emotions. A lot of my past paintings came from difficult emotions, but I don't really separate emotions into good or bad anymore when it comes to art. I would rather just paint whatever I'm feeling. And so right now I'm feeling like a bright star. So at the end of this painting session, the galaxy colors are starting to come together, and I think the blending turned out really well. The bright teal center in the middle is starting to glow against the darker background. This painting is turning out much better than I originally predicted. Thank you again for joining me for day 4 of the Bright Star Intuitive series, and I will see you in the next video. Hopefully I can get this paint off of my wrist by then. I don't normally do outtakes, but I thought this was a funny thing to note. I clean off my paint on my towel and I was resting my hand on the wet paint towel while I was doing those outlines, and I just thought it was so hilarious that I ended up with so much paint on my wrist. So just wanted to share that fun story with you. Have a great rest of your day.